Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to get started. First, I'd like to introduce our host to you all and remind you that this webinar is being recorded. So you are welcome to take notes, but do know that we can get you a recording of this once it's complete. We also open to questions. We have a questions box that you can write in. And in the last 10 minutes, we'll be going over the questions. So we'll be answering those at the end of the call. So stay tuned for that. If you have to hop off, know that you can check that recording at a later date. First, I'd like to introduce you to one of our hosts, Paul Dixon. He is our Senior Vice President and Branch Operations Manager. Today's a tongue twister. 34 years of experience and knowledge, and he worked as well as all of our values. 17 years of his experience actually has been with us at Sovereign. The next host I'd like to introduce you to is He started Sovereign in 2005 with a simple principle to make a difference in people's lives, both for our clients and for the team that serves them. He graduated from the University of Mississippi before venturing into the oil and gas business, and he quickly became one of the top producers. Over 14 years at various firms, he saw the industry shift dramatically, at which point he decided to create a stable and client-focused alternative to the big firms. He's been recognized on Wall Street Magazine as one of the top 100. Russell, I'll pass the mic to you.
Well, thank you, Destiny. Having a little audio problems here, but thank you all for joining us today. For those of you that don't know us, Sovereign Wealth Advisors is one of the largest registered investment advisors throughout Texas. Our mission is to be a very reliable, conflict-free source of advice and guidance for our clients, but we're excited to share valuable resources like this webinar today. Hopefully, have many more in the future. But thank you for joining us, Paul.
Thank you, Rusty. Yeah, and if this is your first time learning about us, I'd like to share a few of our services with you. Sovereign offers comprehensive investment management, financial planning, risk management, as well as tax and estate planning, and of course, retirement and college planning, which you're going to learn about a little bit more today. If you're interested in working with us, please check out our website at sovereignwealthadvisors.com or get with your financial advisor here that invited you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. So hopping on and just introducing who we are, I know that this video will live on, and so hopefully if someone sees us down the line and they're interested in learning more about other services that we offer, please contact us. Our website does have all of our advisors on there and their information, so you can find the right person to work with for you. Next, we have our speaker today, James. I'm so excited that you've joined us. You are our knowledgeable expert on 529 plans, so we're thrilled to have you. I'm going to just introduce who James is a little, but feel free to correct me or add on. James is the Associate Product Manager for Multi-Asset Solutions at Voya Investment Management. He's a member of the team and responsible for overseeing the product management and development of Voya's multi-asset strategies, including 529 plans. So I think you're our resident expert today. James, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, terrific intro, Destiny. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and then jump right into this.
Wonderful. And everyone, again, if you have any questions during the webinar, we will be answering those in the last 10 minutes.
All right. Terrific. Thanks so much again, Destiny. Thanks so much, Russell and Paul. Really happy to be here. Excited to talk with your firm and your clients. So 529, many of us probably know about it. Many of us maybe don't. So it's a terrific opportunity to share a little bit more about what exactly 529 plans are. And it's a hot topic in the industry, and it's especially a hot topic right now as we're going into back to school time. Most of the students across the country have gone back to school, and even as we get further into the year, it's going to be year-end gifting time, a terrific time to leverage the amazing tool that a 529 plan is for year-end gifting and get in those gifts prior to calendar year 2024 coming to an end. So think the thing I'd say about 529 is it's always a pleasure to talk about it, because whether or not you have children, grandchildren, no children of your own, I think it would be hard to say there's not a loved one in your life that you would like to help fund a college education for. And so it's always terrific to be able to talk about 529 plans. So with that, just want to jump into sort of what the formal agenda will look like for today. I want to talk about the importance of saving for college. We all see the sticker price of college. It's very expensive. It's a number that increases by the year, just like the standard rate of inflation across the US, as well as student loan debt being at all-time highs. And so talk a little bit about really the importance of saving now and reducing that burden in the future. I want to go into a little bit of 529 basics, talk about, right, what 529s are, how to use them, how they work, the various tax advantages and the flexible features that they have, and then wrap it up with choosing a right 529 and all of the different features that I think are most important to consider when looking to choose a program, and also why we believe the Voya Tomorrow Scholar Program sponsored through the state of Wisconsin is an excellent option. So with that, I will jump right in. One of the things that I did want to touch on prior to some of my formal agenda remarks is just the big news in the industry that came out in early 2024, and it was a big work in progress throughout 2023. And that is the fact that with the Secure Act 2.0, it now permits, effective January 1st of 2024, so dating back to the beginning of this year, tax-free and penalty-free rollovers from 529 programs to Roth IRAs. And so this is an amazing additional flexible feature that has been added to 529 programs, but there are a number of sort of what I'll call rules and limitations that we just have to keep in mind before moving forward with a rollover like this. So just want to quickly run through these to sort of set the stage. So there is a lifetime rollover limit of $35,000, as well as the account must have been established for at least 15 years. And the funds that are eligible to be rolled over must have also been in the account for at least 5 years. And so just to summarize sort of those first 3 points, right? It's not necessarily a tool to say, hey, let's super fund a 529 account, sort of get this backdoor Roth IRA rollover. It's really something where if you had funds that were originally earmarked for education, maybe the student decided not to go to college, or maybe you oversaved, you now have a means to be able to get some of those leftover assets out of the account and jumpstart that retirement account for the beneficiary, which is the next main point. You know, the rollover must be to the Roth IRA of the beneficiary and not the account owner. So as many of you know, account owners can be pretty much anyone. It can be a parent, a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, a friend, anyone who wants to save for a loved one's education. But the main thing here with the Roth IRA rollover provision is that rollover, those excess funds, must be for the beneficiary named on the account, so essentially the student. The other major thing to take into account here is the fact that applicable Roth IRA rules do apply. And so what that means is there is the $35,000 maximum lifetime rollover, but that's not something that can all be completed day one, right? $7,000 is the IRA contribution limit for 2024. So essentially, in order to roll over the full amount, assuming you have leftover assets, that would take approximately 5 years to do. The other major thing to note here is that the beneficiary does have to have earned income, but one of the nice features here is that there is no upper income constraint for the rollover to take place. So as many of you know, with Roth IRAs and contributions, there is an income threshold at which point you can no longer contribute. Let's just say the beneficiary has a significant income and salary when they leave college and it's time to do the rollover that exceeds that threshold. That is no longer a consideration, and they can still make that rollover to jumpstart that IRA account. So terrific new mechanism. And I think the main benefit here is just continuing to add on to the flexibility and the making 529s more attractive than they've ever been. One of the biggest pushbacks that we continually hear in the industry is, well, what if I save too much, right? What if I don't use all of the funds? How am I going to get those dollars out of the 529 account and leverage them somewhere else? And this removes some of that hesitation around potentially overfunding those accounts. And instead, right, people will instead opt for these less tax favorable options because of that concern. So it alleviates those concerns around taking taxable, non-qualified distributions. It also removes the need to predict exactly how much you're going to need to save for education. And then one of the big things as well is this does help with estate planning conversations and potentially super funding these 529 accounts, knowing that you'll have a method of getting some of those dollars back into the IRA at a future point. And then I think one of the big things here, and something that we hear a lot in industry conferences when we meet with other professionals in the 529 space, is about generational wealth transfer. And right, the high percentage of wealth that's lost during that generational wealth transfer. And we truly believe that 529 is a terrific opportunity to open up those conversations about retirement planning and about future wealth planning with those kids and with those beneficiaries that are going to be using these funds for college. So once again, makes 529s more attractive than they've ever been. So with that, I just want to jump into the first topic, the importance of saving for college. And want to start off by showing this graphic, which shows the total college savings market size by investment type as of 2021. So it is a little bit outdated, but the message really still stays the same. And that is that this is a $1.9 trillion industry. There are 1.9 trillion in assets that are saved for education currently, but all of those assets are spread across 10 or more different vehicles. So we see 529 at the top with 480 billion in assets saved in 529 programs, followed by what we see as cash or other banking products like savings or checking accounts, right? But 480 billion out of a 1.9 trillion dollar industry is only 25% saved in 529. So what the message here is that, right, cash alone is not going to get you there in terms of your savings goal for the future. If we look at the chart on the right, in growth of an account over 18 years, beginning with a $10,000 contribution and then recurring $500 monthly contributions with a pretty moderate investment return of 6%, a 529 plan could grow to over 219,000 by the time it's time to go to college and start withdrawing those funds. On the flip side, if we look at a cash account, not a high yield account, but just a standard cash account, and assuming a 1% interest rate, right, that's going to be $90,000 less and only $130,000 over that 18-year period. So the message here is that, right, we want to avoid trying to leave money on the table and start to get more savers and more consumers migrate their assets to 529 as the most effective savings vehicle from not only a return standpoint over cash accounts, but also from a tax advantage standpoint. And so there's a massive opportunity there to try to continue to build presence of 529 plans for education savers, but there's also a terrific opportunity to help clients in need when it comes to student loan debt. So as we see here, there is almost as much student loan debt in the US, 1.7 trillion, as there are educational saving assets in place for education at 1.9. So it is certainly somewhat of an epidemic. You know, nationally, more than 64% of seniors graduated with student loans. The average debt for a standard bachelor's degree is $35,000. And even before the COVID pandemic hit, we did see 1 in 5 borrowers falling behind, on their student loan payments. And so what it's to say is that certainly clients need our help. If they're not adequately prepared, it could certainly have a burden in the future when it comes to taking student loans, and then the potential impact that that has on future retirement planning, the ability to purchase a home, save for a family. And so we'll certainly get into sort of the impacts of that trade-off as we get to the coming slides. So with that, I just want to talk about college and the cost and why save now. And I think the message is pretty clear. It's the fact that college is extremely expensive, and we see the sticker price continuing to go up year over year. And just to take 2 examples from the chart on screen here, if we look at the University of Wisconsin, over a 1-year period, that cost of attendance is $27,000, and over 4 years, that equates to more than $110,000 paid for tuition, room and board, you name it. If we look at New York University on the sort of private spectrum, $86,000 for a 1 year to attend NYU, which equates to $344,000 over that 4-year period. So saving for college, just like retirement, right, is truly a long-term commitment that needs to be planned far in advance. And it does truly pay off in the long run when we'll start to look at some of the savings versus loan scenarios. But just to expand a little bit further on that and the cost of college, right? The rate of inflation is something important that we certainly need to take into account as well when we think about saving. So if we look at those two same universities and the 2023 cost of attendance, and we factor in the 2.2% average inflation that we've seen and experienced over the past 18 years, and that number's actually been even more aggressive over the past 10 years, the cost of college is only going to go up 18 years from now. And so University of Wisconsin will amount to $163,000 to get that bachelor's degree. And New York University will be more than $127,000 annually and more than $500,000 by the time the graduate leaves college. And this doesn't even factor into account grad school or any post-secondary education that the student or the beneficiary would like to get. And so it certainly goes to show that college is expensive. It's getting more expensive. 529 plans are certainly the vehicle that can help get us there from a savings standpoint, and we'll get into that. And so when we think about those numbers, and they're certainly a little daunting, certainly understand that, but one of the things that we do have available for the program is what we call the College Funding Planner Calculator. And it's our flagship calculator that can really help the conversation when it comes to starting the planning process between clients and advisors. It's as simple as inputting some information like the beneficiary's name, their age, what your savings goal may be, as well as any existing savings or what you think you may be able to contribute on a monthly basis, as well as what the expected university you may think they will go to in the future. And then it will take all of that information, which is pretty simple to input, and it will generate a report that will essentially show, hey, here is your savings relative to the cost of college and relative to your goal, and the potential impact that taking a loan out to cover the spread will sort of have in the long run. And so it's an excellent tool to be able to just show the benefits of saving now, as well as showing the benefits and tax advantages that 529 programs can have whenever you have a chance to generate the report. So all in all, it will provide a really detailed breakdown that will just help visualize and put into context the cost of college, tuition, room and board, your savings goal, whatever shortfall you may have that you'll need to take a loan out, to put into perspective what your financial situation could be by the time the child goes to college. So hopefully that provided a pretty helpful background on just the importance of saving now, especially with the rising cost of college. It's expensive, it's not getting cheaper. So we just stress the importance of education savings as it's such a meaningful market. But do just want to touch on now the 529 basics and try to make it as clear as possible that this is such a powerful tool and is a clear leader in sort of the educational savings space. So to hit it off, I do just want to touch on some of the common questions and concerns that we have heard in the industry and just sort of hit on all of these to provide some quick context on 529, what it is, and get these out of the way. And you'll notice a common theme as I start to run through these. So, number one, can 529 plans only be established in the state of residence? And so, before I answer this, I'll just note that all 50 states in the U.S. have at least one or two 529 college savings programs that are issued by the state, with the exception, I believe, of Wyoming. And so there are a myriad of options to choose from in the industry in terms of what 529 programs are available. The answer to the question is no, you can sell and you can invest in any state's 529 plan, regardless of whether or not you live in Texas or regardless of whether or not you live in any other state. The main thing to keep in consideration is whether or not there are any state tax benefits for using the in-state plan. I know with Sovereign it is based in Texas, which has no state tax or income tax, and so essentially leveraging any state's plan in the industry will have no impact whatsoever on your ability to receive any tax benefit, and so it's really free range in terms of what options are available to you. Number two, can the beneficiary only attend a school in the state that sponsors the 529? So very similar to the first one, the answer is no. The beneficiary can attend most, if not all, universities in the United States and even some abroad. Essentially, wherever you can apply for federal financial aid is where you can leverage 529 plan assets. And then for number three, is the owner the only person eligible to contribute to a 529? The answer here is no, and this is a terrific feature. Owners can certainly contribute to 529s on behalf of their beneficiaries, but 529s are extremely flexible in the sense that any friend, family, or anyone else can contribute to a 529 and still realize some of the tax benefits that may come with your state. Next here is the beneficiary limited to only one 529 plan. Common theme here, the answer is going to be no. The beneficiary can have any number of 529 plans under their name. So for example, if a parent wants to open up a 529 plan for their child, a grandparent wants to open up a 529 plan for that same child, and an aunt and uncle wants to, that is certainly permissible to continue to grow their balance. The main thing to keep in consideration when thinking about 529 is a number of plans do have contribution limits that can exceed anywhere between $400,000 and $600,000 lifetime. And then for the next three here, or for the next two, I should say, who owns the funds? Does this change when the beneficiary goes to college? The answer is no. The owner always retains control of the 529 account, which is also one of the terrific provisions here that is not transferred to the beneficiary. And then for the next two, what if the beneficiary doesn't go to college? Is the money lost? And what if the money is not all used for education? And so we'll get into this a little bit more. I touched on it with some of the Roth IRA provisions, but the answer is no. The money is certainly not lost. There are mechanisms to be able to pull out the money from the 529 account. There could be some implications there, but there are some other alternative methods as well, like being able to transfer the beneficiary and continue to grow accounts for other beneficiaries in the family. So hopefully this just provides a little bit of background on sort of 529s, and we'll jump into some of the other key questions as we get further. So in terms of contributions, how much can you actually contribute to a 529 plan? And what we generally recommend here is that 529 contributions stay within the federal gift tax limits. And so what that means is on an annual basis, for 2024, individuals can contribute $18,000 per year per beneficiary, and then couples filing jointly can contribute $36,000 per beneficiary per year, and these are considered completed gifts. The main thing to keep into consideration here as well is that any additional gift, like the transfer of ownership of stocks or bonds, also count towards this gift tax exclusion, and so it's not just 529. But one thing that 529 does have that's special in the industry is the ability to make accelerated gifts. And so what this means is that the industry permits a one-time gift every 5 years. For individuals, it would equate to a $90,000 one-time gift, and for couples filing jointly, that would be a $180,000 one-time gift, which is essentially equal to 5 times the annual gifting limit per beneficiary. And what this is a terrific sort of estate planning tool to be able to reduce the size of the donor's taxable estate while also helping to fund education for a loved one. And so if we think about sort of this real world scenario of there's a married couple, they have 3 children and they want to be able to save, they can put in $36,000 for each of their children without any gift tax consequences in 2024. So certainly a large number, but for those that do have sort of excess funds that they're looking to contribute, it is pretty flexible in terms of how much you are able to put into a 529 plan. I think the major thing to say here, and we get a lot of questions on this, is, well, what if I go over the $18,000 per year limit or the $36,000 per year limit? What kind of tax consequence am I going to have? Generally the answer is, certainly recommend speaking with a tax advisor or professional. But the answer is, there won't be any necessarily any tax consequences for going, let's say, to $20,000 per year, $2,000 over that $18,000 limit. The only thing it would likely trigger is an additional form that has to be filled out on your state tax return, the form 709. But so long as you're within your lifetime exemption for individuals, which is 13 million, so a pretty significant amount, there would be no tax consequence for going over that number. So just something to keep in mind if you are looking to do sort of high contributions. So moving on here, as I've mentioned, 529s are extremely flexible in the sense that anyone can contribute. So just a nice graphic to show that anyone and everyone, grandparents, in-laws, parents, aunts, uncles, friends, family, can contribute to a 529 for a family member or loved one, and all of them could realize sort of the estate planning benefits of being able to remove assets from their taxable estate if they'd like to start a fund, an education account. So, that's a little bit of background on, right, just the basics, how to save in 529s, how much you can save, but what can you actually use the funds for? It may be pretty self-explanatory. These funds are earmarked for education, but there are a number of flexible uses here that expand past some of the things that you would typically think you would only use these funds for. And so what counts as a qualified distribution essentially meaning distributions, and we'll get into this, that are free from any penalties or taxes, would be your standard things like tuition, any fees that accompany that, supplies, as well as on and off campus housing, and then also equipment, which could include things like computers and other items. But what's great about 529 plans and some of the expanded regulations over the years is it's now expanded into K through 12 tuition. And so up to $10,000 per beneficiary per year can now be used for K through 12 tuition. And there is also a $10,000 lifetime maximum that can be used for student loan debt repayment for either the beneficiary or a sibling of the beneficiary. So a lot of uses here. It also expands to apprenticeship programs and trade schools. So if the beneficiary decides going to college, getting a degree is not something that they'd like to pursue, they can certainly still leverage the funds for apprenticeship and trade school programs, as those also accept financial aid applications, and so you can use your 529 funds there. So, let's talk about tax advantages, because when we think about the power of 529, it really boils down to the terrific tax advantages that it has over some other savings vehicles, and we'll get into sort of a comparison in the coming slides. But we have an example here on screen of, let's say there is a $50,000 balance for a 6-year-old child, and that balance is growing at a rate of 6% a year. And so over that 12-year investment horizon, by the time the child is 18 and ready to go to school, that balance has grown to $100,000. It's important to note that the contributions to 529 programs are made after tax, and so they grow and are distributed tax-free for those qualified educational expenses that I mentioned on the prior slide. And so what we see here is that there are significant advantages to this tax-free growth, because half of the account, if used for qualified educational expenses, are excluded from federal and state taxes. On the flip side, if the money is not needed for education, or if it's not used for education, as I mentioned, this is probably the biggest question that we get in the industry. And so just really want to touch on it. So if a withdrawal is not used for college, or if it's not used for one of the qualified expenses that we discussed on the prior slide, it's considered non-qualified, and that does carry certain tax consequences. And so essentially a non-qualified withdrawal comes with ordinary income tax, so whatever your tax rate is per your bracket, plus a 10% penalty. But the real important thing to note here is that that only applies to the investment gains. And so that does not apply, of course, to the principal contributions that you made already with after-tax dollars. There are a number of situations where the ordinary income taxes would apply, but that 10% penalty could be waived. And that could be due to things like the student receiving a scholarship, the unfortunate death or disability of a beneficiary. But then 529 accounts can also be rolled into ABLE accounts. And these are accounts that are designated for disabled people, or it can be used for anything related to a disability. So think something like disability transportation, medical costs, appointments, home renovations to accommodate the disability. There is a $100,000 maximum savings limit for 529 plans without having any impact on Social Security and Medicaid. And so ABLE accounts for those that qualify can certainly be a powerful savings tool as well. And if we think about the scholarship example, just for those that may be curious, if we think, real world scenario, let's say I've saved for college, my beneficiary or student received an $8,000 scholarship, what now? So you can take out that $8,000 from the 529 plan, and you won't have to pay that 10% penalty, but you will have to pay the income tax on those earnings. So I think the major thing to note here is that, what if the money's not used for education? Certainly there are non-qualified withdrawals. But the big thing to note is that still saving in a 529 program over time gives you that tax-free growth over the life of your account. And so you'll see that here on screen. This example tries to paint the picture of what it truly looks like if you do decide to take this non-qualified withdrawal that carries this 10% tax penalty. And so if we have the same assumptions, we have a $50,000 balance growing at 6%, it's now grown to $100,000. Let's say the beneficiary decides not to go to college. There's no other options to transfer it to somebody else, so they decide, I want to pull this money out. So of course, the $50,000 that you had originally contributed, that return of principal will be free from any taxes and penalties. However, the additional $50,000 that was in investment growth over that 18-year period would be subject to the 10% penalty, and it would also be subject to, let's just say, a 22% tax rate here. And so we can see when we think about that, that equates to a $16,000 sort of penalty or taxes. But what it doesn't show here is that you still gained $34,000 in tax-free investment growth over time by investing in the 529 program. On the flip side, if we look at sort of the scenario where child received a scholarship, they can pull out some of these funds. You'll see that penalty is removed from the equation. And so the $50,000 in earnings would only be subject to that hypothetical 22% tax rate, or $11,000 in taxes paid, and still realized $39,000 in tax-free growth over the life of the account. So this is somewhat similar to sort of what you would see with an IRA or a 401k non-qualified distribution. So putting aside some of the sort of tax implications, non-qualified versus qualified, one of the important things to touch on for 529 as well is the impact of financial aid. And as I mentioned, sort of the main question of, well, what if I have money left over? What if I don't use the account? That's question number one. Main question number two is, well, what impact is my 529 account balance going to have on the beneficiary's ability to receive financial aid? And so when we think about financial aid, it really boils down to, in today's environment, a combination of student loans and grants, as well as things like work study, but it really predominantly leans towards student loans. And I think many of you that have either sent children to college, or whether or not you're planning right now and you're looking at different universities, you've seen something called the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, also known as the FAFSA. And that's something that families can complete when they are seeking federal financial aid. Within the sort of FAFSA equation, there's something called the Student Aid Index, which is also formally referred to as the expected family contribution. It's essentially, what it says. It's FAFSA determining, based on all of the inputs you have regarding investment accounts, what your income is, things like that, to try to come up with some formula or number of how much do we truly think the family is going to be able to contribute to the education cost out of their own assets. And so if we look at an equation here, right, let's just say the cost of attendance at any given university for 1 year is $42,000. Once you fill out the FAFSA, it's going to spit out a number that says, we believe the student aid index is 28,000, meaning that we believe the family has the financial means to be able to cover 28,000 of that tuition cost, which would then mean we now think the student has a financial need or needs financial aid in the amount of 14,000. And so, what this means is that oftentimes families, right, don't even have the means to be able to cover the student aid index of 28,000, and that's where we start to see more private non-governmental loans coming into the equation. But the main message on this page is that, right, student aid index is the most important part of the equation when determining what financial need is. And 529 accounts owned by parents and guardians, as well as grandparents, have minimal to no impact on that student aid index. And so we can see here in this middle column, the treatment of 529 savings balances. The student aid index is only increased by a range of 2.64% to 5.64% for the balance of a 529 program, which essentially means if you have a $100,000 529 account balance, the student aid index could only go up by a maximum of $2,640 to $5,640, reducing the financial aid potential by that amount. So it is a pretty minimal amount that outweighs not saving, right? Saving and accumulating that tax-free growth over time significantly outweighs the minor impact that the 529 account balance has on that student aid index. The other major point that I do want to cover on this slide is grandparent-owned 529 accounts, and this is a huge talking point in the industry right now. You know, there are new rules for FAFSA that make grandparent-owned 529 accounts essentially more attractive than they've ever been, because grandparent-owned accounts have no impact whatsoever on student aid index, so essentially no impact whatsoever on the student's ability to get financial aid, which is different from what we saw years back, where these grandparent-owned accounts did have an impact, as well as distributions counted towards sort of student income. So certainly a great talking point with clients and grandparents to try to get them to jumpstart these 529 accounts for grandchildren to minimize any potential impact it could have on financial aid. But besides that point, certainly parent and guardian-owned 529 accounts as well have a minimal impact. So we do have a white paper talking about this available on our Tomorrow Scholar website titled Major Opportunity for Savings, Minor Impact for Financial Aid, that goes into sort of the ins and outs of financial aid. But then also, in addition to that college funding planner, sort of the simple, easy to use calculator, we do have a financial aid calculator available on our website that can help you estimate based on your inputs of savings accounts, investment accounts, income, the expected family contribution, or that student aid index that could have an impact on financial aid. So certainly feel free to view that as well. So you've heard me say it now, many times by now. First major pushback, okay, I oversaved, what do I do? Second major pushback, what we just covered in financial aid. Third major pushback is what we're seeing right here, which is I started too late. I think it's too late. I don't think it's worth it. And what we would say to that is it's never too late to start saving, right? It's never too late to open up a 529 account and fund the education for a loved one. Now, that being said, you are certainly going to have to make some significant contributions to make up for some of the lost years if you decided you didn't have the financial means necessarily to start an account when the beneficiary was young, but now you do. But it still is extremely beneficial to start that account later rather than never, to reduce the burden in the future of a loan and to hypothetically and potentially cover the full cost of college. So if we look at a scenario here, let's say you had a $0 balance for a 6-year-old child, but you've decided, I now have the financial means to contribute $1,000 monthly. I think that can grow modestly at a rate of 6%. And let's say the current cost of college is $35,000 a year. That balance with those consistent recurring contributions could grow to $210,000 by the time the child is ready to start using those assets, with $144,000 in those principal contributions and then $66,000 in tax-free growth over the life of that account. And so certainly never too late to start saving in a 529 program. And if we see here on screen as well, I love this graphic. It's a powerful graphic. It's a little daunting, but it encourages saving today versus borrowing in the future. And it's extremely powerful, right? If we look at on the left in the orange, let's say someone did have the financial ability to invest today. They decided, I'm going to either make a lump sum contribution or I'm going to make monthly recurring contributions that over the life of my account accounted for $21,500, and I've earned $15,500 in interest. Hypothetically, I can fully cover the cost of 1 year of college based on my initial investment. On the flip side, if we look at the scenario on the right and the potential person that maybe didn't have the financial means to invest early, or they decided, I'm not going to invest at all in a 529 plan. Instead, I'm just going to take a loan. And now you've borrowed $37,000, and let's assume a 6% loan interest rate, interest of $13,300. Now, instead of investing $21,000 years back, you're paying $50,000 in the future. So a $30,000 difference and sort of your financial means because of the decision to borrow tomorrow versus save today. So talk a little bit about gifting here. I've mentioned it already. A number of people can contribute to 529s. The ability to make completed gifts is a terrific all-around tool for friends and family. And on our Tomorrow Scholar investor portal, for those that do have accounts established, you do have the ability to ask for gifts from friends and family, as well as receive gifts into that account. And so, when we think about this, we do a major campaign around year-end gifting. But holidays, special occasions, you name it, they are terrific opportunities to make 529 gifts, whether it's a birthday, whether it's a significant milestone, whether or not it's a holiday, right? We always try to frame the message as, instead of the latest gadget or toy, which yes, child certainly could enjoy for a long period of time. Instead, we can make an impact by helping fund their education for the future, something that's going to have that really long-lasting impact. And so we do have some gift cards available on our website if this is a route that any clients would like to go down. So taking that into account, I'm sure a number of you have the question, well, there are a number of different savings options available to me. Why 529? Why 529 over something else? And this is one of the other major pushbacks that we get. And so we try to lay it out here on screen as simple as we can to show the power of 529 accounts. And so all of these vehicles do come with different features and benefits depending on what you're looking for. But we think, once we go through this, you'll see that 529 truly emerges as the clear leader in terms of the advantages of using it for education savings. And so for 529, I think the main things to note are that the owner always remains in control of the account. So for those that open up an account for a beneficiary and want to maintain control, this is a terrific option for those. No taxation on those earnings so long as they're used for those qualified educational expenses. Those distributions grow free from federal tax. But you also have the opportunity in a number of states to realize state tax benefits on your state income tax return by contributing to 529 programs. When we think about the second column here in Coverdell Educational Savings Accounts, you'll see here, these are certainly designated for education. So something like a 529 where the funds are really earmarked for education, but it does come with certain limitations. You'll see here that control transfers over to the beneficiary when they turn age 30, as well as there are some restraining sort of contribution limits, as well as income restrictions, as well as carrying no state tax benefits for using these types of accounts. And then in the third column there are custodial accounts. So if you think UGMA accounts or UPMA accounts, these accounts do certainly have the ability to come out on top from a flexibility standpoint, because they can be used for things that expand way past college. So they can be used to buy a car, they can be used to buy a home. But if you know that the money in this account is designated for education, a 529 truly is the superior option, as these custodial accounts don't have the same tax benefits that 529s have, as well as they have a much more impactful impact on student aid, so financial aid. It's counted as an asset of the student, which is going to have a much more meaningful impact on their ability to receive loans and grants. And then lastly here, I'm sure everyone is familiar with taxable brokerage accounts. It's really the ultimate flexibility option from an income standpoint, from a contribution limit standpoint, from a I want to pull out these funds and I don't want any restrictions standpoint, but it doesn't come with any of the tax benefits that 529 plans come with. And so if we look at sort of a grid here, comparing all of these savings options, it's safe to say that 529 plans truly do check all of the boxes while having a very minimal impact on financial aid. And so taking that into account, hopefully that was a pretty good overview of just the importance of saving now, the importance of trying to get ahead of borrowing in the future, as well as the key advantages and benefits of 529 from a tax standpoint, from a savings standpoint. Now I want to just quickly touch on choosing the right 529. But I want to start with sort of some of the main conversation starters that we see in the industry that we think are impactful and can make a difference when speaking with clients and others. And it starts with college savings goals. And going back to one of the very first slides that we showed you around the marketplace at 1.9 trillion, college savings can be incorporated into any discussion. We of course know that retirement savings is generally the number one goal, but college savings is generally a close second behind that. This is a huge marketplace, only 25% of assets saved in 529. Tuition is expensive. Student loan debt is at record highs. And so there is a terrific opportunity to drive more clients to using this tax advantaged vehicle that's going to help them maximize their savings for the future. When we think about Secure 2.0, it's a terrific conversation starter as well for those that maybe are a little bit hesitant to open up these accounts because of the fear of overfunding them or having money left over. It's a great avenue to be able to jumpstart these accounts for beneficiaries and start having those conversations about generational wealth transfer. Which leads to the next one, generational wealth transfer and estate planning, removing assets from the estate, reducing your tax liability while also maintaining control. And then lastly, grandparents. We talked about grandparent-owned 529s and the minimal impact it has on financial aid. There's never not a great time to speak with grandparents about their willingness to open up accounts for their loved ones. So I think the main message here is that, nearly, if not all clients within your practice could certainly benefit from 529, even if they don't have children or grandchildren of their own. There could be a loved one that they'd love to save for. And I think the major message as well is that, we want to start shifting our focus from sort of the negative what ifs. Well, what if the beneficiary doesn't go to college? What if they get a scholarship? What if they don't use the money? To really the more likely what ifs if you are funding a 529 account. Well, what if they do go to college or trade school? What if they, get a partial scholarship and not that full ride scholarship that they were looking for? Or what if they do use all the funds? When we look at the national account average for a 529 balance, it generally proves that folks are using all of the funds in their account. And so we should really be focusing on those questions when we think about these conversations in these more likely scenarios to really motivate and start opening up these 529 accounts. And so I want to spend a few minutes also just quickly covering the Voya Tomorrow Scholar 529 plan, our positioning, the offering that we have in the market. It's overseen by our multi-asset strategies and solutions team, which is a leader in multi-asset strategies in the industry. And there are really 5 key pillars here when we think about our 529 product. And number one, it starts with glide path. And just in its simplest term, right, the glide path is how much risk we expect to take over time for these different beneficiaries of different ages. And what we look to do at Voya is really maximize wealth in early years while significantly reducing risk as college nears. The reason being, right, when you think about retirement savings, saving in a 401k plan, you have 40 plus years to save for retirement. And even after retirement, you have years to recover from a drawdown. For education savings, you have 18 good years to be able to build up this 529 balance. And so we want to try to maximize that as much as possible in those early years with higher equity allocations. But as that student starts getting closer to college, we certainly want to take a much more conservative posture, as unlike with retirement, where you potentially can recover from a drawdown, you do not have a lot of time to recover from a drawdown in 529 because these funds are only earmarked for about a 4 to 6 year period. And so that is the approach that we take here. Our program uses a strong lineup. We are a multi-manager program. We're one of the major leaders in the industry here. And essentially this means we don't just invest in Voya Investment Management products. We certainly know we have terrific investment capabilities, but we also know that a number of other fund managers in the industry bring terrific capabilities in a number of different asset classes. And so we're leveraging some of these best-in-class managers that you're seeing on screen here, as well as offering a TIA principal plus interest option that offers currently a guaranteed rate of return at 3%. We also like to blend active and passive management. We know there's a time in the market for both of these investment styles, but when we think about trying to balance risk while also balancing cost for participants, this is something that's really important that we look at frequently, throughout the year. The plan also comes with a number of attractive features. It does have creditor protection under Wisconsin law. So what that means is, if someone does declare bankruptcy, the 529 account cannot be touched no matter what state the participant or the account owner resides in. The program also has very solid 5 and 10-year performance rankings. Really, what we try to do is designed to exceed college tuition inflation, but certainly keep up with college tuition inflation. And then you also have the ability with the plan to name joint account owners. So if both husband and wife, grandparent and grandparent want to be on the account, they want to see how the account's doing, they want to be able to make changes, you can certainly have both people be on the account, as well as name successor owners in the event anything does happen to those original owners. And then lastly, we do have a unique share class structure. Excuse me, I'll talk about this on the next slide, but several different share class options to choose from, a very competitive sales charge that is in line with the industry, as well as convertible C shares. So, we'll see here throughout the program, we have A, C, and W shares available, as well as C1 shares for some of our index funds. But we try to make it as simple as possible. A and C shares are really designed to be equal, only they're meant for different sort of time horizons of investment. So C shares are generally meant for those that maybe only have a 5-year or so time horizon, versus those that are investing over the course of 18 years. Certainly A shares makes the most sense. But we also do have a W share available, which is a clean share class that doesn't carry any commissions or any fees. And this is really for RIAs and fee-based business where you charge a separate fee outside of that. So just to wrap up here on Tomorrow's Scholar, certainly we believe a competitive and compelling offering in the marketplace across A shares, C shares, W shares for both our age-based options as well as our static options. And then we also have 17 single fund options if you'd like to build your own portfolio to choose from. And then
Jane?
the last, yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I'm actually just wrapping up. The last thing I would just mention here, Destiny, is for those, if you are a Wisconsin resident, there is a $5,000 per beneficiary tax deduction that I just quickly note. But I know with Sovereign Wealth, I assume a number of clients are in Texas. So I won't get into this too much, but there are some tax benefits as mentioned with 529s. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I did pop in because we have a couple questions. Are you ready?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So the first question here is, if a grandparent is the owner of a 529 account, should they use that account for all of their grandchildren or open separate accounts?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So this is something that we do hear frequently, whether or not, hey, should I just do this one account? We would generally recommend opening up separate accounts for each of the beneficiaries for a number of reasons. Technically, you could open up one account, use some of the funds that you've grown in that account for one beneficiary, and once that beneficiary leaves college, for example, you could transfer it over to another beneficiary that's maybe now entering college. You would have to go through some additional paperwork. But the thing that we would say is, we do believe it's beneficial to open up separate accounts because all of your beneficiaries may have different time horizons and different sort of risk tolerances when it comes for saving. So we don't think that one account necessarily accounts for the risk that you would want to be taking for each of your different grandchildren.
Great, thank you. All right, our next question. On an accelerated gifting, what if my client only contributes $50,000 up front and not the full $90,000? How does that work?
Yeah, great question as well. So with accelerated gifting, those funds are essentially spread across a 5-year period equally. So for a 5-year period and a $50,000 gift, that assumes that you're essentially contributing $10,000 annually. And given the gift tax exclusion, which is currently set at $18,000, that would mean each year you could then contribute an additional $8,000 without any taxes or penalties. So as long as the client, right, is sticking within those limits, there's no issue. And then once again, even if you are exceeding those limits, unless you're triggering the lifetime gift tax exemption of 13 million or 26 million for couples, there still wouldn't be any sort of tax liability.
Awesome, thank you. What if the student lives off campus? Can they use the 529 to cover the full cost of room and board? That's a good one.
Yeah, certainly. So yes, the answer is yes there. off-campus housing is permitted with 529 funds. The main thing to take into consideration here is that the funds that you use for off-campus housing cannot exceed the amount that you would pay for on-campus housing. And so the college generally will have on their website what the estimated cost of attendance and the cost of housing for on-campus is. And so the 529 funds that you earmark for off-campus housing would need to stay within that range. So essentially anything in excess of what it would be would then need to come out of your own pocket. Otherwise, it would be considered a non-qualified withdrawal.
Okay, we have two more, and then we're coming right up on time, so we're doing great. This question says, I have a client who is eligible for the rollover to a Roth with the account over 15 years old. Should I move it now?
Yeah, so good question. And we've gotten a number of questions recently actually on Roth rollovers. So I think the main thing I would say here is we are actually still waiting on final IRS guidance on sort of the final 529 rollover rules, which I know is a little bit crazy given the fact that this went into effect on January 1, so 9 months ago. But what I would say here is if you know that the account is very cut and dry, you opened this up more than 15 years ago, you've never changed the beneficiary, you have leftover dollars that you could roll to a Roth IRA, that beneficiary has earned income, I would say yes, certainly you can move forward with the maximum annual contribution limit for the Roth IRA. What I would say, though, is if you're a little bit more uncertain, maybe let's say you've changed the beneficiary in the past 15 years, you don't necessarily have clarity on some of those other items around how long have the funds been in the account, then I would say it may be prudent to wait for formal IRS guidance on whether or not you should be going about and moving those assets.
Wonderful. All right, this is our final question before we wrap up this call. Can I roll an okay, this is we got two acronyms back to back. Can I roll a UGMA/UTMA to a 529?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. So if you think back to the comparison slide when we talked about custodial accounts, UGMA and UTMA accounts would fall under those. So the answer is yes, you can certainly roll UGMA and UTMA accounts to 529s. But the major thing to take into consideration here is that, with a 529, you can change a beneficiary at any time. But once you roll that UGMA or UTMA account to a 529, you can no longer change the beneficiary as that account was originally established for a specific person. And so that is really the main consideration. You are limited to taking money out only for college in that case. But there's still a benefit to doing so, right? If you think that it would be more prudent to move the assets over to that educational savings account, you're going to get better tax-free growth than you would in that custodial account.
Wonderful. Well, James, I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk and educate our clients and inform some prospects as well. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we hop off?
No, I don't think so. I think I would just say thank you, everyone, so much for the time. It's right. This is an extremely important topic in the industry, and I think we can all agree that saving for education, saving for loved ones is such a powerful message to go out there with. And so I'm just going to encourage everyone to continue looking into 529 programs as a leader in 529 savings tools.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining. And if you have any questions for us, reach out to us on sovereignwealthadvisors.com. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much all.